Okay, we'll try to move this along. Often overlooked and hurried, the final reconciliation of an appraisal can bring home the effects of research and analysis that were presented in the pages that preceded it. Just as an attorney presents closing arguments in the trial, the appraiser can sell his or her opinion of the value by summarizing points made throughout the appraisal and give added weight to important specific ideas and concepts. This paper looks at some of the questions the appraiser should be asking while writing the final reconciliation. It's also intended to provoke thought on various methods that can be used to better convince the reader. Think of the data that you have worked with in the appraisal and putting it into a funnel. Now, why does one piece of data filter through over another? We can have less reliable information because of the scope of work. If the client has limited your fee, for example, or requests you to limit your research, we talked about that earlier, because he might be intimately knowledgeable about the property. This may not be a cause to do the appraisal, not to do the appraisal, but could result in one approach having greater reliability over another. The cloud of doubt on a verified data, we all know that they were telling the truth, but just couldn't prove it. So when you verify your data, it doesn't always result to a verified sale. Recent events, anyone have an early call on the turmoil in North Africa? So if those things had occurred after you've pretty much culminated your appraisal, it would be probably wise to at least mention that in your reconciliation, to let people know that you were aware of it after the fact, so to speak. Statistics, differences in statistical methods. Trevor related to that with his talk, that it's a modern way of telling fibs. So, it's something that you want to go over and make sure that you're not party to that. Let's see, consistent highest and best use. Ed and Brianna had talked about that earlier, the fact that you can have two possible highest and best uses for a project. The reconciliation is the perfect place to better explain beyond what you've already done in the appraisal on the highest best use, but it's better to pull the whole appraisal together as a result of those two differing opinions. And then finally, more research has indicated it would help to possibly narrow the value. This is a very legitimate matter in an appraisal. If you don't have sufficient data, the client has restricted you in some way, then you relate that in the reconciliation that you've gone as far as you can with the data, but you would recommend that an additional research be done in order to bring that range of value into line. Okay, what is reconciled? These the differences in your appraisal are generally reconciled. Two or more approaches to value, applying more than one method for the income approach and trying to understand the differences there. Differences in unit measure may result in differing values, short tons per acre, volume per acre. A lot of people misunderstand the differing nomenclature that we use, and sometimes we let it slip into our appraisals. So, we need to go back through. If it's significant, then we need to possibly reconcile those differences. Value differences as a result of physical or chemical characteristics. Rich and Gary both alluded, or actually covered it a lot better in this one paragraph. The fact that, if you have those differences, you need to, you have those as a pertinent part of your appraisal, you need to reconcile that at the end at least to inform the reader of that fact. What is reconciled? In short, an explanation of any differences or perception of differences within the body of your work product that could cause the reader to question your final opinion of value. Think like an attorney. What are the potential holes in your thought process? Better to attack than be attacked. So in other words, lay it all out. Let people know that at least you were thinking through this process and you understand the words and the thoughts that you had decided earlier. Reconciling the value indication, performing a checklist. As you go through, make a checklist. Now I'm going to show you some ideas here, but by no means are these all inclusive. As you go through your appraisal, think, here again, as the attorney, what are my potential potholes in this process? What are the arguing points? So if you're doing a sales comparison approach, do I have an adequate number of sales? Trevor covered that. Are the sales close in character? Market support for the adjustments. Trevor covered that. The fact that you need to go out and verify multiple indicators for the sale properties. What is the qualitative support for an unsupported quantitative analysis? In other words, the pluses and minuses versus the actual dollar amounts. So you need to be able to say, okay, my dollar amounts don't add up, and explain why, the pros and cons of any particular property in this particular approach. Is the range of adjusted sale per unit prices within the range exhibited in the market? In other words, if it quacks like a duck, so look at the market. Is it reasonable? Does it work? Conclusions of the approach consistent with the conclusions of any other approach. So if you're using a sales comparison, how does that relate to the cost approach if you used it, or how does it relate to the income approaches that you've used? If you're using surface land sales, pretty much the same thing as a sales comparison. Are there adequate sales, market support, analyzing your qualitative support for the unsupported quantitative analysis. And here again, do the ranges fall in line with what is typical in the market? You may not use a particular sale in a market, or sales in a market for your analysis, but look at them and see if those are reasonable in comparison to what you've determined in your appraisal. Cost approach goes through the same things, and Trevor covered that fairly well in his talk. It's just another way of looking harder at the information that you have developed within your appraisal, and try to explain that to the reader, to culminate in the final pages. What are my strong points, what are my weak points, and why do I believe in this particular point? Here again, if you're looking at the income approach, we've got various things that you need to look at. You'll need adequate sales for comparisons in royalty rates, selling prices in the market environment, typical volume for similar properties, expenses, and it goes on. You just don't pluck from air. You need to verify the information, and if you don't, then you need to explain to the reader where my data sources have come from and how I feel that they're as reliable or the most reliable under the scope of work that I'm working with. And continues on there from similar. Have all elements of discount rate been applied? Well, this just continues on. And then the last one here is various other comparisons can be added to the checklist, just as I had mentioned earlier. It doesn't have to end with just what is shown here. Okay, make sure I got my notes. Okay. Here are 4 points to consider that you want to consider for your reconciliation criteria. Appropriateness, even though the income approach is used, even though it's generally considered the most appropriate approach to value for a minerals property, are there any other approaches, such as the sales comparison or the cost approach, that could add at least a little bit of added support to the overall value? Accuracy, got to believe in your data. If you don't believe in the data that you developed in your appraisal, then you may have to rethink what you've already done. Excuse me. Quantity of evidence. One sale does not make an analysis. Neither does the income approach, survive on discount rates that are generated from word of mouth or publications that have no support. Lou talked about that in his paper. The fact that we need to better support the information that we develop in our discount rates, and we need to discuss the differences. Lou in his talked about the differences, and I think that's one area in the reconciliation where you can really develop a superior appraisal over someone that hasn't really given it that much thought. Quantity of evidence, obviously it's more accurate if you have a lot of data. But if it's accurate data and scarce, maybe you only have one or two sales and you decide, well, as Trevor indicated, you've developed a good indicator for one or two sales, but it's not enough to really include in your appraisal. It might be justified to suggest that in your reconciliation, not as part of your analysis, but the fact that you have developed these sales, that you do feel that they do show some indication. In other words, add support to your argument. Not actually included in the development of the appraisal, but at least give it as part of your argument. And then final opinion value. Gary talked about this, the fact that we have this mindset, banks in particular, that we only have a point value on appraisals. But value ranges are very, very useful in better understanding what that value really represents. The many differences you have, just are astronomical, and if people don't understand the fact that one thing can change and create a different value, then you've kind of lost your audience, so to speak, in the appraisal. So you need to develop that a little bit more. Any questions? I think I got under my time. Thank you. Any questions?
Well, we could, if there were any questions for anybody else, any of the other speakers, we could possibly take that. Take a couple of minutes for that. Anybody have any questions for anybody? Nope. Oh, one up at the back there.
Why aren't all of the authors' slides put into the reprints disc?
Sorry, I didn't quite get that about the reprint.
Why aren't all of the authors' slides or papers put into the reprints?
It's only those of us who. So the question was, why aren't all of the authors' slides put into the reprint disc? Now, the reprint disc is not PowerPoint slides. That's manuscripts. So I went for extra Boy Scout points by. I'm hoping to get my Boy Scout badge finally. I never got one by actually writing a couple of manuscripts, and so only manuscripts got onto the SME CD. But the PowerPoint slides, of course, are used for generating the audio-video of this particular session and the other two sessions.